Hi everybody, this is Eli from Elfbait. Welcome back. Decided that today I'd jump in and do the first adventure recap for the new Monday campaign for 2018. Hopefully it'll go on into and beyond 2018, but it's the new campaign we're starting in 2018. So, as I've been mentioning in some of my other videos, this is a new campaign that started after we decided that we had learned a few things from our first campaign in 5th edition. Gained some wisdom, decided to back it up and start over again. New world, new characters, kind of new angle and pace for the game. Aerolith was a little too big, and we decided to go back small. So, where do we start this campaign? Well, the campaign started in the small rural village of Himley. Himley is a small sheep and grain kind of a town on the southern banks of the river Ekba, which runs westward from the interior of the continent. Now, Himley is a small town, a small village, so small it doesn't even have a proper inn. There's no rooming there. It just has a tavern known as the Bouncing Budgie. It's a quaint name. It's cute, but that's more to do with the proprietor, an elderly lady by the name of Madge, who is assisted by her adult sons and daughters, providing great service, food, ale, and the like to travelers through the village, as well as the locals. Now, Himley is a place that some of our characters are quite familiar with. The orc ranger in our party, that would be Velen, played by my wife. She is an exile from her orc tribe. In this campaign setting, there are no half-orcs. So we're treating half-orcs as exiled orcs who just aren't orky enough. Anyways, she has been exiled from her tribe and has taken up residence to the south of Himley in the Honeywood, a local forest known to be relatively peaceful. It's populated by gnomes and rather kind-hearted. It's not a haunted wood by any stretch of imagination. And her connection with the village of Himley is such that she has been living there for several years. The folk know her as the orc that lives in the woods, but they regard her with at least passing kindness because she's helpful. She brings them food and skins in hard times. She trades with the local folk for what she can't provide herself, and for what she can bring to them that they may not necessarily want to go venturing forth into the wilds for, although this is the countryside, it's not really too wild. She's also known for retrieving lost lambs and bringing home livestock that may wander too far or get lost in the woods. So she's on good terms with the village, and she is spending some time in the tavern at the start of the adventure. Also in the tavern is Erden. Erden is a bit of an exile himself, having had to flee the mountains where he comes from. He is a dwarf. He's a mountain dwarf. He has fled from those mountains under as yet announced pretenses, auspices. He is a fugitive. As far as I understand it from Derek explaining the character makeup. But he is well into his cups, as he's been spending most of his days wasting what reserves of coin he has, trying to drink away his frustration, embarrassment, and shame. Also in the tavern is a changeling warlock, Zavel. Zavel is played by my buddy Moki. He's a changeling in that there are no half-elves in this world, just as there are no half-orcs. Instead, we've taken the same statistics and we've replaced them with changelings. Changelings, in this case, are very much your fairy tale, fate-hampered human children. So, for all intents and purposes, to the onlooker, he is a human, except for there are some differences. He has been blinded. And though he is blinded, he seems to get around pretty well, because what this character has, he has blind sight out to about 60 feet, and he's blind beyond that. But it was a fun concession to go with the theme of his elemental patron. He's playing an elemental warlock packed out of the Kobold Press elemental magic supplement. And so part of that was a bit of a raw deal. He lost his true sight, not true sight as in the special ability, but his regular human vision, and it was replaced with this weird blind sight that he possesses. So he was able to function, but within the limited constraints. So at the beginning of the adventure, those are the 3 characters that we really have in place. There are 5 people at my table. We'll get to the other 2 in a moment. So as they're sitting there at their individual tables, not really spending much time together, there's a bit of a ruckus. There's a loud argument, a rage. The villagers are angry, and this can be heard in the tavern. So they decide to go and investigate. They head across the village, out to in front of the smith, where they see the blacksmith Baden kind of defending himself against an angry mob who are hurling metal implements at him, as well as insults and cusses and threats, while his daughter kind of observes from within the safety of their cottage. At this time, our other 2 characters in the party, which is the High Elven wizard Elan, and his traveling companion, a Wood Elven cleric named Alwyn, who are both spending some time in the local shrine. It's a meager shrine to a local fertility goddess, goddess of agriculture. Nothing fancy. You got a wooden holy symbol and a wooden trough for offerings, and actually a corn stalk and twig effigy of the goddess. Very humble, very, very folksy. But they hear the commotion because it's just down the hill from where they are, and they go to investigate as well. So this is where the adventure really starts. They're not a party yet. I mean, certainly some of them know each other. Elan and Alwyn are traveling companions, and Erden is familiar with Velen, and Velen is familiar with Erden because they've been, Velen frequents the town, and Erden's been there for some time. But Erden is still drunk. He's he's well inebriated and falls into old habits, revealing to the party that he clearly has been in the past some sort of investigator or a magistrate or something, as he very much quickly, even while intoxicated, slips into the role of investigator. Begins questioning the villagers who are claiming that the smith has sold them faulty wares, that their metal implements are breaking and the bottoms are falling out of their pots and pans. Baden, of course, is claiming innocence, that he's done nothing of the sort, that he's not a cheat, he's not a scoundrel, but the angry villagers, the angry mob there, and while they're angry, we're not talking about pitchforks and torches. It's more like, I want my money back, you sorry sod. After all, Baden's been in this town, since he was a young journeyman, and he came to the village. I keep saying town, but it's really a village. I mean, the entirety of it fits easily in half of a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. So they manage to get the villagers to calm down, although not after a few missteps. The effete and academic high elf Elan, who himself hails from an elvish city-state, one of the last remaining vestiges of high elven society that marks the face of the world. He's traveling with his own goals. He's trying to find a way to figure out why it is that the elves have been slipping from the world over the last few generations, and can it be stopped? He takes an interest in what's going on and examines some of the discarded metal, along with Erden, who takes his dwarvish knowledge of smithing and metalworking to determine that the metal seems fine. For all intents and purposes, it is normal metal. However, it has broken. There's no sign of wear. There's no sign of corrosion. It just simply shears off under just the slightest amount of pressure, which is demonstrated when an angry villager takes what's left of his hoe, smacks it on just the dirt ground, and it snaps off. So Elan takes a moment to examine the metal and through making an actual an Arcana check, he's able to deduce that what is happening with this metal seems consistent with some sort of brittle spell, some sort of magic that would be used to take a normal piece of metal and make it, you know, break like glass or cut crystal or something to that effect. The mention of magic, possibly sorcery, possibly witchcraft, rumbles through the crowd, but some gravelly words from Erden the dwarf brings things back, and so we kind of avoid taking an angry mob and turning it into an ugly mob. Once the magistrate shows up, it's rather an ineffectual man who's actually been standing there the whole time, and it's only after the party, who's not quite a party, but the characters, get the crowd to calm down, that Gerald, the local magistrate, an elderly fighter from, you know, who has done his time in the king's army and is settling down to a nice post as, you know, basically the magistrate for a local village, steps in, disperses everybody, nothing to see here, nothing to see, and is very quick to agree to aid from the party. He himself doesn't want to get his hands dirty and go down the laborious path of trying to figure out what's going on. So the adventurers kind of collectively set into trying to determine what is happening. They talk to Baden the smith, and they find out that you know his metal is good. He has taken the he demonstrates that his raw metal stock is fine. He pulls out a recently completed piece of work. It is also fine. It's determined then that something is happening to the implements after he completes them and after he sends them out to their to his customers. It is also found out through this conversation that what has been going on has been happening for about the last couple of weeks. This also happens to coincide with his daughter's 12th birthday. So, there's some more discussion going on. They agree to meet with Baden later, after some pressuring and some conversation. They're not really being mean to the man. I mean, mean, you know, but they're not really pressuring him too hard. After all, he's the town smith. He's got a respected history amongst the community. They don't want to anger him. Not to mention, really, they're the outsiders, with the exception of Valen. Everybody here is not townsfolk, and so they don't really want to step on any toes. So it's agreed that they will meet with Baden later on after dark. They're going to meet at the town meeting hall, which is, you know, only a few streets over. But in the meantime, they spend a little bit more time back at the tavern. Madge has a bit of a discourse with them, fills in some blanks about Baden's history. But another man there, a vagrant for the town who tends to spend his time sleeping off what few coins he earns and then spends at the tavern in the local haystacks, talks about how he had seen Baden arguing at night with some mysterious figure, somebody shorter than him, and that, you know, but he could never make out who it is that they were talking about. That Baden was talking to, but it was clear that there was somebody else there. So when they go to meet Baden at night, they sit down with him and they find out that Baden is a man who made a bad deal. As a young, up-and-coming journeyman smith with no eyes on the future other than coin and fame, he had made a deal with a local fae in exchange for renown and fame amongst the community and a solid position from which to ply his trade. He granted in exchange his firstborn daughter. Now, being a young, like I said, young, brash, excited youth, family, home, community, really not on his mind. He just really wanted to start a business and didn't want to take the time to build up his repertoire on his own. So the Fae did his trick. Years later, Baden is widowed with his daughter surviving his wife. His daughter is 12. It is now time for the Fae to collect, and he doesn't want to give it up. He's not going to give up the last remaining member of his family, but this is why the Fae which is at this point we're just going to refer to it as the Fae, because the Fae, the type of Fae, and what exactly it is has not been revealed to the players, and some of them I know do watch this show. Or watch my videos. Show would be a little bit pretentious. Anyways, they get the information from Baden. They find out what it is that the terms of the agreement as far as Baden understood them. Baden does describe the Fae as a short, hirsute creature with goat-like legs and wild hair carrying a cudgel. So you can fill in the blanks. Now's the time to turn the pages in your various monster books and see if you can determine what it is that they're facing. They talk amongst themselves. Clearly there is something that needs to be done. None of the party seems content with the idea of turning a 12-year-old girl over to a Fae for no particular reason, no particularly known reason other than that a deal was struck. They are a little bit irritated with Baden that he would make such an offer, but again, Baden himself wasn't really thinking family, he was thinking coin. He was a young man, he just wanted to be able to live a life, ply his trade, and make a living. So rather than wait through the night, they decide that they're going to set out and try and make good time and address the Fae as soon as possible. Baden had told them where he had met with the Fae, and describes a large oak, a huge oak, in fact, that is surrounded by a tangle of lesser trees and brambles and briars. It is in the clearing in the middle of this stand of trees that he met with the Fae and struck his deal. So the party sets out across the nighttime pastures and the tall grass. It's fall at this time, so much of the crop has already been harvested about mid-autumn, and so the empty stalks are filling the fields, tall grass, and so they make their way through. And as they approach the mound, the dark kind of looming shape of the copse of trees where the huge oak is, they realize that they're not alone. A gathering sound of rustling, flapping surrounds them and grows more and more prevalent as they approach the tree. They realize that they're being surrounded, and circled and followed and harassed by a massive flock of ravens. More ravens than really should be there, especially in the middle of the night. Though the ravens don't do anything, they do make their presence known. And there's just a general feeling of unease amongst the adventurers as they realize that their approach has not gone unnoticed. This can only be the work of the Fae, and he's really trying to ward them off. As they continue, Elan makes an observation that something else is following in the tall grass, and as the party begins to deliberate what that might be, a large black wolf leaps from the underbrush and pins Elan to the ground. Now, what had happened here is I had made my attack roll, and the wolf had failed his attack, so it actually turned into just an intimidation. And so he stood on Elan's chest, growling and snarling and snapping at him as Elan lay there stunned. Thinking quickly, Zavel pulls out his flute and bleats an ear-cutting, just dissonant chord on his flute. The brash sound stuns the wolf and sends the wolf tottering back into the undergrowth, and they continue their approach to the trees. Now, the rest of the session, as we were running, we only run about 3 hours a night, and we did have a lot of heavy role-playing at the beginning, took the form of the party standing outside the brush, calling out to the Fae. There was an interchange of insults and bravado. At one point, the party tried to goad the Fae into coming out. The Fae then also tried to goad the party into coming in, even parting the brambles to allow entry. Nobody did enter, and at one point a ball, what seemed like a rock, was hurled over the wall of brambles and landed on the ground. The party was a bit hesitant. They examined it. The dwarf first examined it, being the dwarf that he is and using his stonecraft. Realized that it wasn't actually indeed a stone, but more a tightly woven knot, an intricately knotted ball of hair. Curious, Elan, the resident mage of the party, came over and decided to do some more arcane examination. An arcana check was made, and he determined that this was reminiscent of a curse-like object, possibly some sort of talisman of ill omen. Just something in the arrangement of the knotting and the braiding of the hair just kind of sang to him as something to be cautious of. And so the party decided to avoid it, not touching it. Didn't do anything with it. But we ended the night poised for the party to venture into the brambles. They had no luck trying to get the Fae to come out, and it was clear that the only way that they were going to get to see the Fae and confront him directly would be to press forward. So that was the intro session for the 2018 campaign. What did I really like about this? Well, first of all, I very much enjoyed the fact that everybody tried to get into character. It seemed to fall in rather naturally. Derek did a wonderful job of playing a very intoxicated dwarf, down to being very weirded out by Zavel and his ability to see without seeing. He's clearly, obviously blind, and yet he's able to function and move around and deal with stuff. At one point, the dwarf, Erden, just turns to him and looks at him like, "What are you?" And, just not, like, frightened, but just like, "Oh my God, what are you? Tell me. It's perplexing me." There was interaction between players, between characters and NPCs. There was the interaction with the vagrant tourist, the mage, the taverner, the tavern keeper. There was interaction with Gerald, the magistrate. There was just a good amount of interaction. There's interaction with random villagers, and actually, it was a very cool little aside. While Erden and Zavel were interviewing Baden the Smith, Valen, the Orc Ranger, walked in and talked to Baden's daughter Bridget, and tried to get some information on what was going on as well. So there was a very good effort by the rest of the group to use skills. I was very happy to see that they were immediately just jumping in and doing skill checks, arcana checks, persuasion checks, insight checks. They were very much on top of doing this without losing pace with the role-playing. That was something that made me very happy as a DM, because it meant that they really were they were understanding their characters, and confident this time around to really just get in there and do it. While Alwyn's player is more of a spectator type player, he's very much into it. He just very much likes to observe and enjoy. Even he played his character well. His character is a pilgrim. He's a wood elf who has been sent out into the world by his god to do some good in the last days of the elves. The elves are disappearing from this world, and so Alwyn's god, Alwyn is a cleric of healing. He's a straight up healer, so he's out there doing his thing, trying to help in the world. And even he was able to play his character as interested, but clearly this wasn't his purview. He's not a mage like Elan, but Elan's player jumped in there and tried to do what a academic mage would do. He played his character as kind of a know-it-all, often speaking a little bit more academically than really the situation warranted, and the other characters responded in kind. I mean, there was certainly some eye rolling about his conversation, but it was kept in character. That's good. I always like it. Even if a player is annoyed at another player's behavior, maybe they're hogging the spotlight, or there's a certain idiosyncrasy, or they feel that they're just not getting it. We all have those moments in the games. I do like to see it when that is handled in character, rather than players getting irritated with each other. Redirect. Keep it going. Keep the improv going. But all in all, it was a good session. We didn't have any combat, which at low levels is saying something, because low-level adventures often are find the goblins, kill the goblins, take their stuff. So in this case, we had lots of roleplay. We had 3 hours of roleplay, which led up to just the edge of what possibly is going to be the confrontation. But I still don't know how the party's going to handle it. Are they going to try and attack the Fae once they confront him? Are they going to try and force him to break his deal? Or, based on some of the conversation they had, there's a possibility that they're going to try and find a way to finagle him into breaking his deal, or somehow finding a loophole in the deal. Elan was very specific on trying to determine the exact wording of the deal with the Fae. It's already come up, why hasn't the Fae just taken the girl? And the terms of the deal stated that Baden must surrender his daughter on the 12th birthday, or after the 12th birthday. And so at this point, the Fae really isn't, as far as they're concerned, as far as they're understanding it, the Fae really is not allowed to take her, because the deal was that Baden would have to give her over, which also would explain why it is the Fae is engaging in the smear campaign against Baden instead of just kidnapping the girl. So we'll see how that goes. I'm kind of jazzed. I can't wait to get in on Monday and run it again, see where they go, and hopefully from there I'll have another recap for you next week. I'm going to try and get them in as I can. They may not be every session, depends on what goes on in a session and how much I have to report. But yeah, this campaign is off to a good start. If I have to look down at my notes a couple of times with the names, it's because I haven't really committed them to memory yet. That'll come with time. And you'll be hearing names of the cities and towns in my campaign setting, and I'll kind of explain where they are. And I'm likely going to post up somewhere a copy of the map. I did reference it in another video about building smaller locales, so I'd like to post it somewhere where people can take a look at it. So as I'm naming these places, if you want to follow along in your book, it's kind of cool. You can do that. But anyways, thanks for coming and checking out the Session 1 recap for the 2018 campaign. Welcome to the Principality of Tronwald, which is where this is all taking place. Let's see what adventures ensue. Like, share, subscribe, and put your comments down below. Discuss. Do you have questions? Do you yourself have insights? Maybe you can figure out what's going on. Do you have any suggestions for my players on how they might defeat this wily Fae and his scheme? But all in all, have fun, get out and game, and thanks for coming by.